Resist. Are you an activist? As we enter this Martin Luther King cycle where U.S. image makers are redesigning Martin Luther King to fit their image and likeness, and in my opinion, is a sublime tactic to reinforce U.S. imperialist wars. For instance, President Obama's offensive in 35 African countries, as well as the unleashing of Saudi Arabia's finance jihadists throughout the world. We at Freedom Now want to posit a revolutionary position on Dr. Martin Luther King, especially since he's being kind of sublime tied to supporting, in essence, Obama's foreign policy, the Democratic Party's foreign policy, and prior president's foreign policy. So we're going to have two components to this presentation. One will be Dr. Horne's giving us his kind of global, his kind of critical analysis of Dr. King, and we'll follow with Brother Manu Amping, who did his dissertation on Dr. King and has a whole other point of view on Dr. King when it comes to the question of armed struggle in the Third World, the question of black power, a number of questions that are critical. So we're going to start with Dr. Gerald Horne. Welcome to Southern California, Dr. Horne.
Thank you for inviting me.
We want to get your analysis of Dr. King juxtaposed to the kind of bourgeois analysis that's being beaten down our throats at this time of this cycle of the year, you know?
Well, I would make briefly a couple of points about why Dr. King remains important to us today. One is his anti-war posture, that is to say his opposition to the genocidal war in Vietnam, a position that now is accepted, generally speaking, as being a correct position, but certainly in the 1960s when he adopted that position, it was quite controversial and led to him being condemned by leaders of mainstream civil rights organizations such as Roy Wilkinson and NAACP, amongst others. And the second is closely tied to that. I would really suggest that those who are capable of going to the Internet find immediately, if not sooner, Dr. King's analysis of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, an analysis that he gave in February 1968 in New York, just a few months before he himself, Dr. King, was assassinated. And in those laudatory remarks, he said that Dr. Du Bois should not be marginalized or somehow attacked simply because he became a communist. The importance of Dr. King to us today was his strident objection and rejection of anti-communism, which is one of the closest things to a civic religion that has existed in the United States in recent decades. You may know that even though he was under intense pressure by the White House and the U.S. ruling elite, Dr. King continually sought to employ radicals and communists as aides. And I recall an incident when John F. Kennedy invited him into the Rose Garden of the White House to somehow evade and avoid the bugging devices by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover to instruct Dr. King as to who he should hire and who he should not hire. And Dr. King paid lip service to this advice, saying that he would go along, but then maintain covert interactions with these radicals. And I think that this is a lesson that we must observe today, because I think too many of our leaders feel that they still have to accept instruction from those who are basically oppressing us.
You know, I received an email from our friend and a radio producer in Canada, Brother Norman, a photo of Dr. King with Ahmed Ben Bella. Quite interesting.
Well, absolutely. Not only that, but I think another importance of Dr. King that is tied into the two previous points that I mentioned was that he was not adverse to internationalism. I mean, I think one of the points that I've tried to establish in my own historical forays is that what has helped to bring us to this point in North America, that is to say, from slavery to what we now endure today, is the fact that we've had global allies, international allies, and we have not tried to rely wholly and solely upon having allies in North America. If that were the case, we might still be enslaved. And I think that Dr. King basically absorbed that lesson, which is one of the reasons why he could not only be photographed next to the revolutionary from Algeria, Ben Bella, but also why he studied very closely the example of South Asia, India more particularly, in terms of adapting and adopting strategies and tactics that were used against British colonialism. So this, too, is part of the lingering and lasting importance of Martin Luther King, Jr.
Well, my brother, we got to move on, but I thank you very much. Any final words as we move into the commemoration of Dr. King?
Well, I think the final word would be that we have to absorb the lessons that I just articulated. That is to say that any organization that does not have global ties or global analysis that does not put our struggle, that is to say the struggle of black people, or even the struggle of the U.S. working class, into a global context, and then try to structure a strategy based upon that particular analysis, it seems to me you're basically missing the boat.
I remember in discussion with Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, he talked about how they had intense pressure put upon them by their major financiers in SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, both non-governmental, progressive liberal Jewish organizations, among others, not to take a stand on international issues like the question of Palestine. And some would argue that at the point the civil rights movement grew and began seeing an interrelationship, but with U.S. imperialist wars and increased impoverishment of U.S. citizens generally and Africans in particular, and that as with Dr. King, many of those activists, the Cleveland Sellers and the Mukasas and so forth, began traveling and analyzing what was the U.S. doing in Vietnam, what was it doing in South Korea, what were they doing in the Congo and so forth, that in fact that became the critical line that caused the movement categorically to fall into the crosshairs, a more focused crosshairs for destabilization by the COINTEL program and other forces of U.S. imperialism that does not believe that black people, African people, should go beyond our struggle in the United States and not see its interrelationship with the U.S. imperialism and the global struggle of the press throughout the world. I think that's very significant because, once again, when we take international stands, we become more of a threat to U.S. imperialism.
Well, brother, I think you hit the nail right on the head, and I'm not sure if I could put it better.
Okay. We thank you, Dr. Gerald Horne.